Hello, and welcome to the Write Club podcast, where we take you behind the pages and into the fascinating world of writing. I'm Beth, and this is Mary, and we're part of the team at Writing Magazine and Writers Online. Morning, Mary. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you, Beth. I'll get straight on to introducing our brilliant guest. Bibi Berki is a writer of fiction, non-fiction, and podcasts. She began her career as a news reporter before moving into film history and storytelling. Her debut novel, The Watch, was shortlisted for the Lucy Cavendish Prize. She is also the creator of The Kiss, an acclaimed audio series exploring women in film history. This August sees the release of her brand new novel, The Youngster, a tense and heart-wrenching literary domestic thriller.
Bibi, welcome to the Write Club podcast. Where are you joining us from today?
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm joining you from my study in sunny southeast London, and it's full to the rafters with all my kids going back to uni stuff. It's like a sort of IKEA warehouse in here, rather than a study.
It's that time of year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone's getting ready for the new school year, and it's just, yeah.
Just over prepare, I think.
Rather over than under.
True, true.
And you started your career as a news reporter before moving into fiction, non-fiction, and podcasts. So, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah. I mean, I was quite young when I decided. Well, I felt really strongly that I wanted to write fiction. So it was very present, probably from my adolescence onwards. But after university, I just felt I didn't have any life experience, and I just wanted to work, I wanted to earn. After university, I thought I'd like to have a go at journalism. So I did. I went straight onto a newspaper. I was lucky enough to get a place on a newspaper, and a sort of roller coaster ride in local and national journalism followed. And sometimes I was good at it, sometimes I was bad. But throughout all of that, I still wrote. I always wrote fiction, and I think I sent my first manuscripts. And in those days, you put it in an envelope with a stamped addressed envelope inside, and you sent it off. This is how old I am. And I was lucky with the first one. An agent was quite interested. He got back to me and he said, and I thought it was really sort of arty and interesting, and used a lot of language very interestingly. And he got back to me and he said, "Sorry, but listen, my word of advice to you is just write a good story. Forget about all the pyrotechnics. Just write a really good story." And so I did. And I think I was working in London by then. I started working on the Eastern Daily Press, but I moved to London, worked on a legal newspaper, and at the same time wrote a story about the discovery of a bog body, an ancient bog body, and how it tied in with a sort of modern story. And I was very lucky, and I got an agent straight away. And I thought, that's it. Hey, that's it. I've done it. I'm 29, 30, it's going to happen. But as we all know, getting an agent is no guarantee of anything. And it didn't get published. I wrote 2 more books for her, and then we parted company. I had a family. Life happened, literally wilderness years. And I kept on writing, living, enjoying life, doing stuff, but nothing really hit home right until the Lucy Cavendish Prize, which was about 5 years ago. And then things started moving. So I've got a huge backlog, in other words.
So that novel, The Watch, that was shortlisted for the Lucy Cavendish Prize, what did that recognition mean for you at the time? Did it give you the confidence to explore all the other formats that you've gone into?
Actually, it was huge in the sense that it opened my eyes to the process, if you know what I mean. There were lots of agents then that were interested, and I realized what they were after and how to play the game in a way that I had been far more secretive about it before. It was like one of those, it was just between me, it was my thing, writing, didn't show it to anyone. I'd send it off, I'd get rejected, and that was it, end of story. And I'd lick my wounds and write another manuscript. And I realized that it isn't like that. It's a sort of it's a business transaction. You've got to be on top of it. And Lucy Cavendish sort of put me in touch with lots of younger writers who were far more savvy about the process. So that was one thing. But actually at that point, I'd already started my little production company, and I was working with an actor. I still do. He's the co-founder. And that was the eye-opener for me. we read together manuscripts. He gave me feedback. With the watch, I recorded the whole thing, and he would listen to it. And another, a very good friend of mine also would listen to it, and I would get feedback. Someone else read it. So as that period opened my eyes to different ways of working, which is not this secretive failure or success or failure kind of thing. It wasn't as binary as that. It was sort of, you can do things differently. If a manuscript doesn't work as a novel, and I'd always thought it's just novels. There's nothing else out there. But of course, there's so many other ways that people consume. Sorry, I'm rabbiting on, but so many ways that people consume stories. It doesn't necessarily have to be in that novelistic form. Of course, we visually watch them. Scripts are so important. Our kids play games that are story based. There are so many other ways of consuming stories. And I think that was that turning point around that Lucy Cavendish time, which was actually there are other ways I can do this. And then that just relaxed me, and I could just write. And if it fails, it fails. If it doesn't, that's great. Really.
I think that's a really important point to make actually for our listeners, is that just because somebody has potentially rejected your novel doesn't mean it's bad. Everything's subjective, and you could just, it's like you say, you could just maybe that needs to be in a different format and somebody would love it. So I think that's a really important piece of information to be giving our listeners.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that people realize that, because there seemed to be like a pecking order of importance, literary importance, with novels at the top. And I had to unlearn that in a way. I had to realize that actually it's what, and my kids taught me that really. They're not big readers, a novel is meaningless to them in the sense that TV is meaningless to them. So there's a whole world of different ways of consumption. And, that period coincided with the big audio boom. And this is still part of it, this podcast, I guess, is that people are listening again. And at one point they only listen, there's a kind of orthodoxy, isn't there? At one point they only listened to Radio 4 for drama. Now there's a world of independent drama out there. I mean, you have to find it, you have to search through it for the gems, but it is out there. And I think I was lucky that I was writing. I hadn't given up. I was still writing at a point where these new opportunities arose, really. So yeah, don't give up. It is subjective, and it might be a format issue. It might be that, that your style, your way of writing fits another medium brilliantly, which is as important.
We've also had lots of authors talk to us about reading their work out loud. This kind of links into as well, and how possibly just being open to that and putting it out there in different ways can help you to see it differently. And, maybe it becomes something else. You're not so precious about it.
Exactly. And I think I was precious about it. I think that's the thing. I'm not saying, there's been a radical transformation. It's not like I'm, a bestseller or something. It's simply that I'm more relaxed about the process, because I know. I'll give you an example. I wrote a novel called Your Most Avid Reader, which I really liked. Usually I hate everything, but I quite liked it. And as somebody suggested, an agent, I sent it to, and he was a relatively big shot agent, and he called me in, and I thought, again, hey. And he called me and he said, I couldn't put it down. I said, I could not put it down. And he said, that's a cliche, and I don't normally use that with people. But he said, I'm not going to publish it because I hate the format. I don't like it. So I went off, feeling very glum about it, thinking I can't change this. And the format is two women talking to each other. And the more they talk, and it was via email, the more they talk, the more entangled the story is, the more the past comes back to haunt them. And between them, they are writing a book. And it comes back to bite them on the bum. But some years pass, and I think it suddenly hit me, of course, that's an audio drama, if ever there was one. But I didn't think of it at the time. All I thought of was they're just novels, there's nothing else. And I was lucky enough, like I said, to have this sort of a production company, and we recorded it. And we worked with two fantastic actresses, and it's now like a 24-part drama.
Wow.
And it's, I had never thought of it, and I don't know why I was so slow on the uptake, but I suppose that's my illustration to say that there could be other lives for something, even if it seems to be not getting anywhere.
It's brilliant.
It's worth exploring them, really.
Yeah. And we wanted to talk to you about your new novel, because we've talked about that recently, The Youngster. It's described as a literary domestic thriller. Can you tell us about the story and what inspired it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's hard to define things, isn't it? I mean, that's as good a definition as any. But I didn't. I suppose I'll tell you what inspired it. So we're going back a bit. I had maybe taken the kids to school, or they'd gone to school, and unusually for me, in the morning I'd put the telly on, and I can't remember why. And I was wandering around the house, and there was a consumer show on, and the story that they were looking at was about a woman whose elderly mother lived in a cottage and by herself and had vascular dementia, but was still living solo. And a young man used to walk up and down the path in front of her cottage, and she would be in the garden, hang out the washing or something, and he'd lean over the fence and chat with her. And at first, it didn't register with the daughter what was going on, but slowly, he worked his way into the elderly woman's life. To the point where he moved in, and shockingly, to the point where secretly he married her, and then legally owned the property, owned everything, and even to the point, I don't want to give too much of the book away, but I mean it's but those are the parallel lines that's in of my own book, because I remember it was a jaw-dropping moment. I just thought, what must it be like for the daughter, this middle-aged woman, loves her mother, and now she's totally cut off from her. There's no, the mother kind of belongs to someone else, who cuts off all communication with the daughter. And I just thought, how would you respond to that? Would you come out fighting? Would you roll over and just accept this is what it is, or would you come out fighting? And that slowly snowballed into a story. And I haven't replicated it anyway. I didn't look at it further. I didn't want to reproduce that particular story, but that was my starting point. That was a jumping off point, which was what would happen with the daughter. And the daughter, certainly in my book, wants to control the situation, and that's how it spirals out of control, really. So yeah, that was my inspiration.
Wow. It's an absolutely brilliant book. I could not put it down when I was reading it. I just needed to know exactly what was going to happen. It really kind of kept me on my toes the whole time, and I was like, surely, I thought at one point this woman's going crazy, she's making it all up, and then I was like, well, was she making it up, or what's going on? So yeah, it was brilliantly written. It definitely did everything that a thriller needed you to do. So yeah, absolutely brilliant book.
Thank you very much.
And you've written about how the COVID lockdowns kind of shaped this book and other writers' work. So how did that unique period of everyone's lives kind of feed into the themes and the setting of The Youngster?
Yeah, I mean, almost, I could just throw it away and say it was a plot device. I'm tempted to say that, because that was it was two things. It was a plot device because it separated people. So it's very handy in that sense. Mm-hmm. But it was also recently in my recent history. And I just think I couldn't wholesale remove part of my history and ignore it. And because it was in my mind, and it was sort of uppermost in my recent experience. And also I kept thinking, what must it be like? An awful lot of people were intubated in that period, were put on, had very significant hospital interventions and stuff. And so I was also thinking, how would that affect a person mentally? So it was a two-pronged thing like that. But it surprised me reading the reviews, which I'm so grateful for, so many lovely reviews, but it surprised me how central it is to many of the reviews. And I suppose it because we feel we've moved on, but maybe we haven't. And I know I was told at the time, oh, not another COVID book. And I kept saying, well, it isn't one. It absolutely isn't one. This is a story about a relationship and a daughter battling to get her mother back. But I'm being naive, it is there and it is something we've all experienced. So it's, we're all going to bring ourselves to that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it as well is because we've all lived it, it makes it very relatable, and you have to think to yourself, what would you do if you were in that situation? If there was a lockdown happening and a massive pandemic, you couldn't see anybody, and yet the person who is vulnerable and needs routine, suddenly you can't see them, and it was making me think, like, what would I do if that was my mum? And we all lived through that, and if I was separated from my mum in that point, what would I do?
Yeah.
So I think it's a really important theme to have throughout the book, because if COVID wasn't there and that was to happen, you could just go around your mum's house. So I think having it set in that time has made it a lot more tense and a lot more frustrating in parts as well, because that no matter what, she couldn't just walk into her mum's house, and people were being so strict.
We didn't know what was going to happen, did we? Like that, you sort of forget how scary it was to be watching the news and thinking, oh, this is life changed forever. And now that we kind of came out of it and think back to it, it's something that I think all people are going to, we want to understand how that happened and what that meant to us on a very personal level, and how it's affected our relationships with people.
I think you're right. I think it's also that maybe it takes years for a historic moment like that to bed down. And also I think with people just desperate to move on, they just wanted their life. I mean, I knew people that were deeply, deeply, a very good friend of mine was really angry that she was prevented from leading her social life. So I think there was this real appetite to just move on, forget, just as there probably was after the war. But actually we're doing ourselves a disservice, because there were people we lost there. It was a significant period, and I don't want to say I'm using it lightly just as a plot device. Sometimes these things get a life of their own that a writer didn't even know people would pick up on. But I didn't think it was a negative to set something. Let's just put it like that. I didn't think it was a negative to set something in that period, because it's undeniable. It would be like a writer writing during the war and just ignoring it. But like I said, I didn't want it to be front and center, because we got on with our lives. It's just like, as you quite rightly say, the basics of seeing someone or visiting someone just was taken away from us, and that's the starting point, really.
Yeah.
And that sort of surreal moment of what is happening. And you're right, it's scary. It was scary. The only time I've ever had a panic attack in my life was during lockdown.
Really, I think that's probably the same for quite a lot of people, wasn't it? It feels a bit like a fever dream now that we actually went through all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, many of your stories are set in Southeast London as well, where you're based. How does place influence your writing on the page and in audio form, where your atmosphere and soundscape is playing such a massive role?
I think it does. I mean, I am more interested in what people would call a smaller novel, the domestic ins and outs, the emotional investments that we have in life. And, as a reader, you would then have in that book. And I think home is such a central point. We have such an emotional connection with our homes. So the novel I'm writing at the minute is set in actually just outside. I don't know what, I've never lived in suburbia, but I seem to be setting a couple of books there. And the one currently is in a very large suburban house, and the main character has come back to it after a while, and I realised the house and the garden are important, maybe because houses and gardens are important to me. But I do think the most interesting of life's dramas take place within families, between people, and I guess it's a good emotional vent for me as well, really. So sorry, I think I've digressed from your question.
No,
place,
no.
you said. I think place is for me is the vital because it's because that's the kind of story I like to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, if it's given you a release whilst you're writing it, then that's a win-win, isn't
Yeah,
it?
not quite. Yeah, I know. I don't know if I consciously go into it like that, but the kind of books, I mean, I guess I write what I like to read, which is some sort of emotional connection with something, a sort of it's not a conceptual book. It's not a book about ideas. Those are great. It's just that I tend to read stuff where I see my life experiences, not necessarily my life experience. Sorry, that's totally wrong. I can see a human response to something that I recognize. That's all. So I guess that's great fun to write.
The Youngster deals with themes of tension and domestic drama, but you've sort of touched on it already, but was it more challenging writing the emotional or the creative or the structural parts of the book? Which is the bit that you go to first, I guess?
I think I've probably kind of answered the first bit of that just before by saying the emotional stuff I find I want to write it. I want to explore those. That's what keeps me up, and then that's what I make notes about, how someone felt about something and responded to something. The structural side, the creative side, I find much harder now, and maybe because I've got an aging brain or something. But whereas I used to, go to the screen, write something, and I was pretty happy with the first draft. I mean, it's a massive slog. Now, it's a slog for lots of reasons. I have, young people, old people, both drawing on my time, which is quite right. That's how it happens. So I don't have much mental space, but also I have to rework things over and over again, which is a novelty for me. Whatever I'm writing, I know that's not going to be the final version. And it's a much longer, harder slog to make it so that I'm happy with that structure. And if I'm happy with it.
You mentioned the Tempest Productions, which you co-founded earlier. When you're creating the original audio stories, what excites you most about writing for the ear, and how does collaboration in audio compare to the solitary process of writing fiction?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly for me, for moving from the solitary to the collaborative, absolutely seismic difference. And really, sort of when we first started Tempest, we were making, we did a series of sort of what we kind of felt at the time were like tales of the unexpected, dark stories with a sting in the tail. And I really enjoyed that, but we would work together to make sure that it worked, as a written piece to begin with. And often through that conversation, it would be a much better ending than I had envisaged. And I was very excited about that. And then, you kind of hand it over to the actors, the director, and it's out of your hands. And it's fascinating to see what becomes of it. It's a really exciting process. And I work with the co-founder, Mark Lingward. He's an actor, but he's got a brilliant brain for storytelling. He's a natural like that. So it really released a mode of storytelling that I hadn't explored before. And consequently, I think we've done a lot of good stuff. I mean, we're currently focusing more on history and telling historical stories, sort of very obscure, unknown ones, more in a as beautiful a narrative process as we can. And so we've set up a channel called the History Kiosk, and that's on Spotify. Quick plug there. So, but I still think I'm still bringing in that storytelling process. And at the same time, my sort of life passion has always been film, and I studied film, and I've have a lifelong fascination for older films. And I started writing, again, this is a good example. I started a book exploring the making of a film that was made in Germany. It's an all-woman film called Mädchen in Uniform, and I did a lot of research on the women who made it. It's a fascinating backstory. It's set, during the war, the things they went through. I only thought about it as a book format. Never even occurred to me anything else. And there was a little ripple of interest, but it never got made. And the usual, dismay and wound licking that I mentioned. And then, of course, then it hit me, why not write it as a podcast? And I have a historian friend who sort of quality checked it all through for me. But otherwise, it was my story and my telling of a story. And I think that's possibly, I have to be honest, the thing I'm most proud of as a piece of work, really, that I created. And I'm so glad I did it. And I'm so glad it's got out there, but because it wouldn't have got out there in the traditional printed form. It's a wonderful audio revolution, and I'm glad I've been involved in it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Lots of interesting new avenues to go down there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you see yourself writing more psychological thrillers, or is there a part of you that's tempted to experiment with some different genres?
This is where I'm at the minute. I mean, I think where my head is definitely in that sort of domestic thriller, if you like. Who knows? But that would be where I am. I have written in the past a series of lighter books under a different name, under the name H.A. Ferdinand. I wrote a series of more, I hate to say comic novels because it's very difficult writing anything funny. And they're just lighter. I just call them lighter. But again, very narrative there. And I really enjoyed it. And that's where I was at the time. I had such fun writing them. And one of them actually, then we were thinking of making into an audio. It's called Mrs. Tempest's Marriage Bureau. And then we recorded it with an actress as an audio book. And again, I realized I do seem to be writing for audio, whether I know it or not. And those 4 comedies under H.A. Ferdinand, that's where my head was. And I absolutely loved writing them. And I had something pushing me at the time. But I think under my own name, yes, I'm more into stories that I hope people can connect with, but put people in extraordinary situations. And push them into places where their emotions explode.
I think that's a brilliant kind of explanation of the Youngster, to be honest, how that made us all feel when we were reading it. So yeah, you can definitely see that that's what you're passionate about, for sure. And is there something that you're working on at the minute? It's another book that we can expect out of you?
Yeah, I mean, I hope. And I think when you're writing anything, there are no guarantees, are there, that that you'll see it. I remember being at a little sort of book festival, a literary festival for The Watch when that came out, and the compere said to me, "Are you working on anything at the minute?" And I said, "Well, I'm writing something about a predatory marriage, the Youngster in its earliest form." And he said, "Oh, we look forward to that." I said, "Don't hold your breath. I don't know when it's going to come out or who's going to publish it." But there was a woman in the audience who came out. This was a tiny event, and she came up to me at the end and said, "Oh, well, I mean, I broke the story about the Diane Frank's story, which is the one that I saw, on the TV." I thought, what are the chances? She's the one who originally broke that story, and she said, I'd love to read it when it comes out. I hope she's read it.
Amazing.
Anyway, I've sort of segued into that. So the book I'm writing at the minute is a very intense inside look at a marriage that is it's an odd marriage, let's just put it like that. It's 2 young people who've made a sort of verbal contract in youth to kind of look after each other in the safety of a marriage, and then in middle age it all goes wrong. And all the sort of unspoken bitternesses start coming out, but there's also a mystery, because I always have to put some sort of mystery in there, so there is that as well. So there's jeopardy. Brilliant. I always have to have a bit of jeopardy. I want you to turn the page.
Absolutely, that sounds brilliant. Can't wait for that to be out. We'll keep our eyes out for that one.
Like I say, don't hold your
breath. We believe in you. After reading The Youngster, I have no doubts whatsoever that we'll be reading that sometime soon.
I hope so.
And we always end by asking for a book recommendation. Is there something that you've read or listened to recently that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Right. Okay. I've read some pretty bad books recently, so I'm not going to recommend them. I just had a bad run. I think I got seduced by, the hype, I think, a bit of publishers' hype. And so I've been quite disappointed. So I think what I would recommend, actually, because it's a writer I love and it's a book that, in a way, exactly what I was talking about, it seems a small domestic issue, but it's picked apart so that it's really thrilling, is a book by Dorothy Whipple, written in the post-war, actually, I think probably in the 50s, called Someone from a Distance. And it's about a marriage coming apart. Sounds boring, but it isn't. Somehow, she's brilliant at getting under the skin of people. And that was published or republished by the wonderful Persephone Books, which republishes sort of forgotten writers, but that were huge at the time. And Dorothy Whipple wrote some fantastic books, and Someone from a Distance is the one I think I would recommend.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to put that on my list. And thank you so much for joining us, Bibi. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Right Club. And everybody go and check out The Youngster, which I think should be out by now.
Thank you so much. The pleasure's been mine, definitely.
Thanks for tuning into the Right Club. We hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to keep writing. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at Writers Online, your go-to for writing tips, competitions, and exclusive updates. Plus, you'll never miss an episode of the Right Club. Until next time, happy writing.